I'm Jill Lane. I direct the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies here at CLACS. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this session today that we have with two of our distinguished alumna from the program, who we are delighted to welcome back. We were just saying prior to starting the session how nice it would be if we were actually welcoming them back to the space. And that we could all be together, but we're happy to have us all together and on Zoom in the absence of that possibility. So the purpose of these sessions, the perspectives from the field, is to catch up with some of our alumni and see what they're doing and the paths that they've taken since their time at CLACS, to share those experiences with current students or even some prospective students who I know we have on the call today as well. So you can get a sense of possibilities for future directions that you might take, and hear perspectives and maybe some advice from alumni about the program, or how to use the program best to move on to your next steps. And we are really delighted that Christy Mladic and Amarilys Estrella agreed to come and talk to us today. You will see, I'm going to ask them, my first question will be to ask you to tell us when you were at CLACS, and then give us a sense of where you are now. And then we can spend a lot of our discussion talking about sort of the journey from one to the other, right? But you will see that we've intentionally paired Christy and Amarilys because they have very similar trajectories, and I think are going to be able to give us a lot of deep perspective on the career paths that they've taken. So I'm excited, really excited to have you both here. So let's get started. I don't know, maybe I'll pick on you first, Christy, and ask you to tell us a little bit about when you were at CLACS. We coincided ever so briefly, so I have some idea of what that was like, and then maybe tell us where you are now, and literally tell us where you are on
yeah.
the planet, and then what you're doing.
Perfect. I started at CLACS, my MA, in 2008, and I finished in May of 2010. And actually, Odi Gonzalez and we came at the exact same month to New York, and I was in his first Quechua classes. So hi, Odi. Yeah, we often reminisce about our common stay in New York. And then now I am in the Chicagoland area. I am an ACLS Leading Edge Fellow. I have a non-academic postdoc at the organization Freedom for Immigrants, which is based in California, but I'm working remotely. And I'm also part-time faculty in the Latin American and Latino Studies program at DePaul University, which I'm also doing remotely from home.
Thank you. Well, we'll ask you how you got to from an MA to a postdoc shortly. But Amarilys, do you want to tell us a little bit about when you were here and where you are now?
Sure, and thank you again for the invitation. And I think it is a great pairing, Christy and myself, just because there is a lot of overlap. So I also started fall 2008. I did finish a little later. I finished in September of 2010. So it took me a little bit longer just because I was also working full time while I was doing my master's program. And I am in New Rochelle, New York. I am a postdoc fellow, also an ACLS postdoc fellow, but mine is the Emerging Voices Fellowship. And I am currently at Johns Hopkins University in their History Department and Program for Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, maybe you can tell us a little bit about I hope our conversation can go in two directions. And one would be to hear a little bit about your time at CLACS, what that was like for you, what in particular, maybe a memorable experience from CLACS and how CLACS might have prepared you for your next steps. You may have to reveal your next steps in order to, to share that with us. So I leave it to you to tell the story in whatever order makes the most sense. But Christy, can we ask you to maybe talk about, you've already mentioned Quechua, which was such an important part of our program, as it remains an important part of our program today. It's really a signature of CLACS, right? And you were very much part of that first generation that made it so. You want to share a little bit more about what it was like to be here at that time?
Sure. I was very lucky that I was awarded the FLAS fellowship, which Amarilys, I have so much respect for working full time while you were in that MA program, because it's a very demanding program. The fellowship allowed me to have a little bit more time than I think someone like Amarilys would have, and luckily, CLACS was also very supportive. Me and two other graduate students, we actually started the Quechua Night series. And CLACS was very supportive of that. So that came out of my time at CLACS. I studied with Odie, and yeah, I was also new to New York, so I was looking for ways to be out and about in the city. I'm originally, well, not originally, but I grew up quite some time in Chicago, I guess you would say. And so, yeah, I was looking for ways to be out and about in the city, and meeting people. And so I very early on began using that Quechua kind of thread as a way to move about the city and meet people. And then I would say, right, you went like right after CLACS, my next step?
Sure. You can go along.
So I actually didn't think I was going to get a PhD when I was doing my master's. There were a lot of people in my class who thought that would be their next step. I actually didn't think it was for me, which Faye and I joke about now, because I actually went in her office and she said, "Have you thought about a PhD program?" And I said, "I'm not PhD material." which she helped me understand is like really not the right way to think about things. Nobody really is or is not PhD material, right? It's just like, do you think that is something that you can, participate in, and you become PhD material if you choose to go that path, right? So, and we can talk another conversation about why I even thought that, right? But yeah, that actually is a common thought that a lot of people think. So I'm very happy now to be at DePaul and to help people kind of break down those barriers that they might put on themselves. But I actually applied for the Fulbright twice. Immediately after CLACS, I started working on it. I thought maybe that was a good next step for me. And I was denied it twice. But what was very interesting was that the third time I applied, I got it. And that was during the PhD program. So immediately after CLACS, I actually worked at CLACS for 2 years, applied for the Fulbright twice, did not get it, and then thought, as I was preparing my application for Fulbright, I stayed in connection with people at NYU and Faye and Tom, and they said, this application for Fulbright actually looks like a PhD application. Why don't you try it? And I tried it, and I did make it into the PhD program in anthropology at NYU. So that's there's still many more steps, but those are some steps there. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Christy. Amarilys, do you want to give us a little sense of what your experience was like at CLACS and
Sure.
your next steps were?
Yes, I will also try to be as succinct as possible. But I guess, yes, as Christy mentioned, for me, I was already working at an international human rights organization um, when I basically had that position out of undergrad. And I was at Hunter College, and it was an admin focused position, but I was working with a team that was doing a lot of work on Latin America and the Caribbean and supporting grassroots organizing in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I was really interested in expanding my own knowledge and learning in terms of the region. Um, and so, of course, there was the experiences that I had as the child of Dominican immigrants, but I wanted to really have a space where I could dedicate myself to learning more about the politics and even just more around grassroots organizing. And so that's how I first got to CLACS, and it was really an amazing opportunity because I think in joining or in starting the master's program, I didn't think, just like Christy, that I was going to end up doing a PhD. I actually thought, well, this is an opportunity for me to grow in my current position at my job that I had at the time. And as Christy said, I did work full time, so it took me a little longer, but it really I was there when Tom Abercrombie, may he rest in peace, was the director, and then Ala Ferrer towards the end. Um, and so it was really an amazing experience in the sense that I got to learn so much more than I thought I could in that short amount of time while also working, right? So that challenge was always there. Um, but I remember speaking to Arlene Davila, who was one of my professors, and she asked me, "Well, are you planning on doing a PhD afterwards?" And like Christy, I was like, "Oh no, 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 that's not in the plans. My plan was really to just become a program officer at this organization that I was working at." And so when I finished at CLACS, I was really excited to go back into the organization that I was with. It's called American Jewish World Service. And I actually was able to become the program officer for Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So a lot of that was my ability to grow within CLACS in terms of my knowledge, but also to be able to get a master's degree, which allowed me to have that next step in what I thought would be my long-term career as a program officer in the Caribbean. And and I think for me, being at CLACS really allowed me also to expand my research around citizenship, questions of human rights, particularly in the Dominican Republic. Because the topic that I work on and that I collaborate with activists on is this question of denationalization in the Dominican Republic of Dominicans of Haitian descent. So all that to say that I had the opportunity to really expand my knowledge, to work more closely with grassroots organizers during that time. I did get a summer fellowship, so I was able to go to the Dominican Republic and conduct some initial research. And I think it really planted the seed for me, even though I didn't go straight into a PhD, to start questioning, I think I would say, even the dynamics of international funders with local organizations. And so I think that I would say CLACS allowed me the space to just to really start wondering, like, what are the power dynamics at play here as an international funder? Global North, global South relationships, as they were often framed, and what could I possibly do to explore this more? And so it really is about 2 years after I think I started 1 year after Christy, so we both ended up in the same anthropology program at NYU. So Christy started 1 year before me. I started the following year, and at that point, then I dedicated myself to the PhD program in anthropology. And I'm now a postdoc, so I'm 2 years out from graduating from the PhD, and I am at Johns Hopkins University.
That's so amazing. What a what amazing trajectories both of you have had, and it's very similar, but it's amazing to to hear how CLACS provided a space for you to imagine getting a PhD when you didn't start with that idea, right?
Mhm.
And the purpose of our session is not to talk people into getting a PhD or not, but if it turns out that, you know, any of you are sitting there thinking, am I or am I not PhD material? I think, you know, you've heard two experiences where, as Christy says, maybe that's not the question, right? Maybe the thing to do is to be thinking through where your curiosities are, right? And what has CLACS opened your mind to thinking about and created that space for you. You mentioned your research, Amarilys, but I wonder, Christy, if you could tell us a little bit about the research you did while you were at CLACS, like what your master's project was and whether that helped you in your next steps to thinking about a PhD.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Amarilys, also. Before, I also was working at an international nonprofit before CLACS. I was working in the marketing department. So I was working at Opportunity International here in Chicago, which is a microfinance. It's a very, very big microfinance organization. And as I was working in the marketing department, okay, so my BFA, I have a BFA in photography and a BA in English. And after those degrees, I actually went into marketing communications. And I started in the private sector, so I do have that experience, but I found that very unfulfilling. So after that, I actually volunteered in Chile with a local nonprofit running participatory photography programs for young women living in shelters. And I started to think more about photography as a tool for social change. And with that, those kinds of questions around Latin America, I moved back to Chicago and looked for a job that had a more international focus, right? So I could be learning while I was working, and I found this job in the marketing department at Opportunity, and I appreciated some of the work that they did, but like Amarilys was, I had a lot of questions, and I had a lot of questions about how they were using photographs of people, how photographs of people were being recontextualized, reframed, and not without their permission, right? Or with their permission. So I was really questioning also the politics of, international development discourse, of these kinds of power dynamics around representation. And it was with those questions that I went into CLACS. But I shifted my focus away from Chile. I actually wanted to focus more on Peru. I wanted to tap into the longstanding interest I had in Peru because I actually have adopted siblings from Peru. And so I just had these longstanding questions about US-Peru, relations. And then I coupled that all together with like photography, Peru, Quechua. So once I entered CLACS, I actually sat down with Tom, and he sat down with me with my application. And remember, I had studied photography in English. So, and I had worked for 5 years before coming to CLACS. And so I sat down and he said, Christy, what you're actually asking, those questions you're asking, those are being asked by anthropologists. And I was like, what's anthropology? Literally, like, what is anthropology? So it was really eye-opening for me. He introduced me to Faye. I started studying Indigenous media and, not just, politics of visual representation in photography, but also in film, and bringing language dimensions into that. And so I also had planned on returning to the nonprofit world. That was the idea. And when the job opened at CLACS, I thought this would be exciting because I could continue to be around these conversations that for me were still going on. I only had more questions. I had answered some. I'm not saying I didn't answer questions, but of course, right? You ask more questions and then you have even more beyond that. So it was really lovely to be able to continue some of the same work that I was doing as a student, but in a more professional, dimension. And then it was actually those same questions that I continued asking. I was going to continue that with the Fulbright, and it turned into my PhD project of really asking, like, what are some of the contemporary effects of photographic practice in Peru, and not just those that enter a kind of art regime, right? But like an art market regime, but like daily photographic practice. What are some of those social and political and economic effects that are happening in Peruvian worlds? So those were the questions that I started asking in my PhD program. And I also did the culture and media. Amarilys, did you do culture and media? No, I did the culture and media program, which is in like, it's at NYU. You don't have to be in the anthropology department to participate in it, but it's an extra advanced certificate that you can add on to an advanced degree program with permission. If you're not in anthropology, you get permission. And then you acquire documentary film training at the NYU Film School and in the anthropology department. And at the end of the program, you leave with both a documentary that you produced and an advanced certificate allowing you to teach or run like a documentary film program when you leave. So, and with that, I made Living Quechua, about Quechua language activism in New York. So that was part of that.
Right. Wow. One of the things I love about your there are many things I love about your story, and yours as well, Amarilys. You both mentioned Tom Abercrombie, who is, for those of you who don't know, was a professor here at NYU and a former director at the center, very beloved, who passed away not long ago. I miss him terribly. And I think your success, both of you, the trajectory that you took from CLACS to the success that you're having today is in so many ways thanks to him. And a real testament to his teaching and mentoring, and we see that in you all the time. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and appreciate that we're, like you, thinking about him frequently. He's been, a real part. He's in the fabric of the life of CLACS, right? I also appreciate from what you've said, and Christy, you talked about your journey from an English and photography training to anthropology. I think one of the things that CLACS allows by being an interdisciplinary program is for someone to enter through one door, right? Walk in from photography or from, say the arts, as some of our students do, and walk out through another door, right? Because you've had this exposure to this interdisciplinary training. And I think your stories, both of you, really show that, right? That you arrived at anthropology through a not linear journey, right? That you came in different ways. And I really appreciate that about your stories. I'm going to ask another question, but in the meantime, I wanted to invite everyone who may want to pose a question to write a question in the chat, or get ready to ask a question. We can use the raise hand function, we're a small group, so any which way is great. But I was going to ask each of you if you maybe had some advice for current and prospective students in CLACS. And maybe this is a way of asking you both about things that you think that from your transition from CLACS out into the path you ultimately took, things that worked for you that you felt were valuable that others might be able to replicate or model themselves on, but then also maybe things that you have advice that you wish had happened that didn't happen, or something you learned after CLACS that you would want to pass on to someone who's going to be in the same situation as you in a short period of time. So I don't know who wants to go first. Amarilys, do you want to go first?
I find this to be the hardest question always, because it's, there's so much that I'm reflecting on and thinking about my experiences, and yet I know that we're all might take different paths in this in terms of your journey in the master's program. But I guess one thing I would say is that just going back to the point that Joe, you were making about interdisciplinarity, I think it really just provided an opportunity for me to explore. So the regional focus allowed me to really come at the questions that I had from so many different angles and disciplines. I was a political science major, and wanted to do more work focused on the region, but then, as you said, decided anthropology might be the next course to take for myself. But only after spending 2 years back in the nonprofit world. And so for me, I think the things that were important were to, one, sort of always find ways to connect what I was doing in terms of my organizing work, my nonprofit work with what I was learning at CLACS, and how to build connections to the communities that I was really looking to work with. And so I think that in many ways, it really helped me to not romanticize those relationships, those connections, and to think very carefully about what are the power dynamics at all times at play in both our research, but whatever your next trajectory might be. So I think it really gave me an opportunity to start imagining what collaborative research and scholarship can be within our own positions of privilege, right? As scholars, as folks who are um, uh, in academia, right? And so it's funny, I'm saying all of this because I see that Ana Balike, who will probably not say a word, but is here, is one of the organizers that I was able to really build with during that time. And so I think that having the opportunity to both have the space to sort of collectively think with others about what it means to talk about the region, to work within the region, really helped me understand how I wanted to then bring that into the next space that I was going to be part of. And it really did influence how I did my work moving forward. And then even that decision to shift and go into anthropology. So for me, just kind of having a place to both brainstorm, but really begin or creating the stepping stones or however you want to frame it, to be able to work more collaboratively really started at CLACS. And so for me, it's important, and I think it's something to think about as we're all kind of developing our projects and thinking about what does it mean to work and talk about the region from New York, right? Or from wherever else you might be. And then I think the other thing that's been very exciting for me and that I have appreciated is the fact that I had the support of scholars, as you mentioned, Tom and Arlene. And I think in some ways we were there at the moment where the anthropologist might have been very much leading the department, and it clearly had an influence in our trajectory, right? So just sort of acknowledging the importance of having that space and how that shaped and influenced me moving forward. The last thing I will say, though, is I wish I would have applied for more fellowships and found more opportunities for collaborative funding for collaborative work. So I was doing the work, but I think something I walked away with, and I think I'm doing a better job now, is realizing that you can try to tap into as many resources as possible in the process, which I think starting the master's, I didn't have as much of a sense of, and clearly as I went along became better at it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's so interesting. And I'm going to ask you, Christy, the same question, but just to note that one of the things that seems so striking to me about both of you that you've embodied about that is also a kind of signature of CLACS's work. And I'm not sure if it's a signature because of students like you, or if you are the way you are because of CLACS. I think it's a symbiotic relationship, but is precisely this interest in the intersection between activism and learning, and a commitment to kind of applied knowledge of thinking about what we learn in the classroom in relation to real world problems, and real communities and the impact on real communities and vice versa, right? It's something that both of you have clearly done so beautifully and with so much success. And it's something that current, I can see some of them on this call, current students are very much engaged in as well. And there seems to be a good trajectory and tradition there. But anyway, Christy.
Yeah, I would say that one thing that I felt was so rewarding about being at CLACS was also finding a group of other students who also wanted to connect what we were talking about in the classroom with, different kinds of activism, not only in New York City, but across the hemisphere. So it was incredibly rewarding to find these people. We had an amazing, we called ourselves the Quechua Outreach Committee, and then we changed it. We just had a lot of fun working collaboratively with so many different groups. So this can manifest itself in so many ways. And maybe it's, can happen in lots of different ways. My trajectory was more, it was heavily influenced by my interests of, language and film and photography. So we did, help try to uplift other people's causes and other people's work whenever possible. So through the Quechua film series that we did, we helped a collective in Ecuador with their Kickstarter campaign video. We started the podcast series, but really that connection between inside and outside the classroom, that was really a rewarding dimension of my time at CLACS that I would recommend if it sounds exciting to you. I find that planting, I always think of it for myself as planting a lot of seeds. As Amarilys also mentioned, I've become better at this over the years, but really trying to think ahead and looking for opportunities to apply for potential fruitful relationships with people where we might be able to collaborate. Really trying to, because not everything is going to turn out and sprout and grow, but if you can plant as many seeds as possible, then you might, have a beautiful garden at the end of it if you just want to follow the metaphor through, right? But I really do think about it that way. Also because I don't know if I don't know how you found your time, Amarilys, but having a job and then having to stop that job, in my case, to move cities, to go to school, and then you graduate and you have these periods of stability, but they're marked by potential phases of instability. That can be really tricky actually to navigate, especially the older you get. And you might have people relying on you. You might have to support your family members or whatnot. So just remembering to plant as many seeds as possible to set yourself up to maybe not have a space of unemployment or without health insurance, just to bring it down to day-to-day living here for a minute. And another thing that I currently am still working on is constantly trying to do more informational interviews. Because if you are not completely set up for the rest of your life, you might have to pivot. You might have to change. You don't know if there's going to be another pandemic or if you're going to, lose your job. And the good news is that educational degrees, they set you up to do all kinds of things. And so you can learn about that. It's never too late to do informational interviews. And it's always a good idea to just continually be meeting people and to think how you might take all of the knowledge that you have been, you know, acquiring and producing, and to think about what causes you might be able to help and uplift and contribute to, right? So I think that that's something else I would add into the conversation.
Oh, that's such good advice. That's really good advice.
My name is Bethany. I'm an alum of the program as well, like a year ago. Yeah, so I loved hearing about how you both worked in nonprofits, and something that I loved working in nonprofits is the collaborative nature of it, and how you feel like you're very invested in things that are happening on the ground, or can feel that way. And something I found difficult about doing field research was connecting and collaborating with other things and like getting plugged in as I would with a nonprofit. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about your field research, and I know you mentioned like collaborative processes, but how did you kind of set that up? And I guess like when I think of PhD, I think of myself in a room like reading things, thinking of things by myself, you know, and I love working with other people. So what can that look like? Is there potential for that?
I think for me, I actually think that having had the experience of being in the nonprofit world actually helped me get people to speak to me when I started my research, my field research, because I had some connections already from both the master's at CLACS and from being in the nonprofit world. And I think, and I understand what you mean by the sort of feeling connected or having a community, because there is already a space where people are already coming together to talk about these issues. And the nice thing is you can get paid also, right? So at least that was my case. But it really did help me to say, you know, I had worked on these issues, or I'm very interested in understanding more about, let me just say that in the CLACS program, what I was doing was more questions around sort of the state's role in perpetuating anti-Blackness, and specifically how that happened and through these policies in the Dominican Republic. And then in my PhD, even though I'm still very much working on these issues, I was more interested in understanding the role of human rights and how the organizers were engaging human rights. And so I think from the beginning, I was able to come into the PhD program with these questions and these observations from my time at CLACS that allowed my committee to really help me start thinking about, well, what exactly is your question, right? So I kind of came in with something to already discuss and engage with the committee. But there were, I don't know if Christy, this was your experience, but there are moments of you know, being on your own with your books, a lot of reading, exams. So I don't want to just make it seem like you're always constantly in a state of collaboration. I think there is, those first 3 years or 4 years were very intense in terms of being in the classroom, preparing for exams. But I did then spend a year conducting ethnographic research, which allowed me to then take all of these questions and all of this learning into a space with folks who were working specifically on human rights activism. So for me, it was the opportunity to be able to really take what I had learned and processed from being at CLACS, from being in the nonprofit world, and then finding ways to both say, hey, I actually have this knowledge. This is actually what happened a lot. I would say I know how to do these particular things on Excel or whatever other programming that I learned from being in the nonprofit world. And then I would say, I can help you with this. Can I sit in and start listening to some of your meetings also and take notes? I used to love to offer to take notes because it was an opportunity for me to sit there and listen, but also then walk away with actual concrete notes on what happened that day. So those were just some, I think those are some things that I did to try to find ways to not feel very lonely in the process. But Christy, I don't know what you would want to add, if there's anything else.
Yeah, I found the coursework years to also be very challenging. Interesting, very challenging. I was still involved with quite a bit of activist efforts in New York City at the time. I was involved with a couple organizations outside of academia that were related to Quechua language outreach. So I also made my film at that time. So that was really exciting because I was filming alongside coursework with Elva Ambia, who lives in Brooklyn. So that was really a great addition to my coursework experience. And then I spent 1.5 years in the southern region of Arequipa in Peru. And it was, I was looking at photographic archives and how they move around and what the relationship might be like of the rise in a discourse of mestizaje over the course of the 20th century in Arequipa, alongside the like massification of photographic access over also the course of the 20th century. So I was looking at like ideas of the region and the nation and questions of belonging alongside ideas of race and indigeneity and photography, photographic representation. Basically, I would call myself, while I was there, like I was like a detective of photography. And so because our photographic archives, most often you're going to actually find them in people's homes. And so I was, I was building relationships with people who were already collecting photographic archives. I was building relationships with photographers. I was building relationships with family members who had inherited archives. And they were also very invested in, understanding, finding, cataloging, looking at these photographic archives. So I was incredibly busy for that 1.5 years. I met lots of people. I was just running around the city and these towns. I was also filming, and a lot of people wanted to participate because they wanted this story about photography to have what they saw through me was international exposure. And so, so when I came back, I actually found another period of isolation, which was the writing up period. That was actually probably the most isolated that I felt, part of which was the pandemic, part of which was that I moved away from New York to a new place, and I couldn't really meet new people because of the pandemic and whatnot. But what was the flip side of the pandemic is that so many people went online. I actually was able to keep up so many relationships with people in Peru. And we actually founded an organization that I am a member of. And for like official, we exist in Arequipa and online, and it is an organization for the study of and conservation of photographic archives in Peru. And I continue to work with people on that. And we're actually organizing our first exhibition, or a second exhibition this summer in honor of Peru's 200th anniversary. It will be a virtual exhibition, very much related to my dissertation research. And so I feel like there's this sense of collaboration and working across the hemisphere on things that, we are all interested in and we really think need to be brought to, put out more into public discourse, whatnot. That can still happen even in a period, right, of like isolation of writing a dissertation in a pandemic. So I feel like, if you can, it's possible to continue that. And I'm looking forward to the time where I can, go back and continue these. I plan on, as many anthropologists do, right? Like continuing these relationships. I see this as lifelong, whether I'm in academia or not, I see this as like a lifelong project of dismantling racism, helping to uplift people that are doing great work in Peru and collaborating where I can, you know, and yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do.
That was such a great question, Bethany. Thank you. And thanks so much for those answers. We do have a question that's come to me that's for you, Amarilys, and it's really if we can take your mind back to your experience as a student at CLACS. Someone curious about how you balanced working with studying. If you have any advice for someone who's setting out on that path.
That's a hard one.
So,
That's a great question. So one of the things that I did was all throughout the whole process of applying for the program, I did involve my supervisors at my job. And so they were very aware that I was interested in doing a master's program. And they were very supportive of that. So I do have to say that I think if they wouldn't have been so supportive, it would have been much harder. But that being said, it was still difficult. So I don't want to sugarcoat that experience or make it sound like, you know, it was a walk in the park. I used to spend a lot of weekends reading for my courses. And, you know, every once in a while I did also ask for a little more time from work to get my work done. And I know that that's not going to be the case for everyone. But for me, it did end up looking like finding, you know, saying no to other things on the weekends so that I could make sure that I was keeping up with my readings and my work at CLACS. And, you know, every once in a while, my job did require travel. So I made sure that I always worked with my supervisors around when were the semester breaks, those 2 years that I was in the program, so that we would never organize trips during the time that I was in class. But it took a lot of just, you know, I mean, I'm big with calendars. So it was literally looking at my calendar and saying, this is exactly where I have some time to read today, or this is exactly when I can start writing this paper. And just asking for forgiveness from family, colleagues, and friends during those 2 years. I just want to be frank about that. It did take a lot of work to get it done. And I have to say that's why I did do it. I think, I don't know if this is the case now, but Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, but most people were finishing within 18 months.
That's right, 3 semesters.
3 semesters. Yeah. And so I took a 4th semester because I wanted to pace myself a little more and just give myself a little more room to be able to have a more manageable workload.
Well, that's excellent advice. Thank you. Georgina has a question. Who's a prospective student, an admitted student who we hope will come and join us on this journey here at CLACS, and asks, what are some of the resources that you would recommend to utilize? I know you may have some we can also add some, those of us who are around can add some recommendations as well, but things that occur to you. You've mentioned a couple, but things that strike you from your time at NYU, either as master's students or PhD students, that you think would be good resources for students starting out.
NYU has so many resources. I was really excited about a lot of them, even things that aren't like only for GSAS, but like the digital studio, is that still around? Mm-hmm. That was a wonderful place to go to work on, you know, a media project that you needed a really powerful computer for, something like that, you know, and you could even ask for assistance. I really appreciated the commuter lounge in the student center. I mean, there were some things that were kind of general for anyone. I found out where all like the hot water spigots were, where you could like make tea. You know, the private rooms at the library, excellent, right? Like you can reserve them. We would have study sessions either with people or on your own. I loved the quiet rooms at Bopst. They were just phenomenal. You know, they have quiet rooms where nobody can talk. Really, really great. Amarilys, can you think of other ones?
Yeah, I think you probably made more use of those spaces than I did. So I'm learning of a few as
Yeah.
you're speaking now. But I love the rooms as well. I used to reserve the private rooms all the time, because I found that my writing and learning style was more of the be boxed into a space with a with a desk and a chair and nothing else to distract me. And so that was something that I used to register for all the time. I do want to just say the writing center was also very helpful.
Oh yeah.
So that's the one other one that I could think of that you hadn't mentioned. But otherwise,
Oh, there was also, NYU has so many, if you're thinking of doing one of these, looking for some kind of collaborative work or a project on the side of your, I don't know if you're working full time or not, but if you're looking for some kind of an outreach project that you want to do in collaboration with your academic work, there's a lot of people on campus that are also interested in that. So at one point I was thinking of creating like a Quechua language app thing that would aggregate different Quechua language resources into an app on a phone. And I found people in the ITP program and at the Entrepreneur Center, and I was getting free access in the Entrepreneur Center to trainings. I mean, it was really interesting that NYU just has a lot of resources, and almost every time if you email someone, you'll get a positive response back. So it's a really great campus for collaboration.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think your stories also tell us that getting involved, especially yours, Christy, getting involved with some, Quechua became not just a subject to study, but a subject around which you did, as you've described, so much organizing, so much collaboration with other students. We definitely like to encourage students now to continue that work, either in relation to Quechua. We also teach Creole now and have a lot of work around that. But some of our students who are on the call also get involved working with us and get involved with our events or some of our outreach programs. And those are always some really great resources to complement your studies, right? And to help make some of those connections for you. And I think that's maybe been especially the case during COVID, when you need some of those introductions to get made for you. What a wonderful hour. And thank you. I want to thank you so much for sharing your experience, and really to tell you what on behalf of CLACS, not just of me, but the faculty here, the staff, the team here, how wonderful it is to see you again, how proud of you we are. I don't know if I get to say that. I don't really take any credit, but for all your amazing talent. But you guys are such success stories, and it's wonderful to have you come back and share that with us, and share your knowledge with others who we hope will follow in your footsteps. So I thank you immensely. And if we were all here, we'd all be giving you a round of applause right now. And thanking you so much for lending us your time and advice and talent and intelligence. So thank you.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure. It's great seeing some familiar faces also.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us and organizing this, and thank you all for attending. And yeah, our emails are there, so feel free to reach out.
Yes, for sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So thank you everyone for coming. And we will have another one of these events, which we'll let you know about in the future. And I wish everybody well, a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Good seeing you all.